Okay. So in humans, when you're pregnant, you say you're pregnant. We call it pregnancy. But in the biological world, we call pregnancy the gestation period. So the gestation period is the time from when the baby implants to the baby's born. For humans, that gestation period is roughly 40 weeks. For other organisms, it could be 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Elephants, it's 24 months, so 2 years. It just depends on the species that you're speaking about. So, yesterday we talked about the difference. No, we didn't. That was anatomy. The difference between an embryo and a fetus. An embryo is weeks 1 through 8 of development, and a fetus is 9 through birth. So, gestation is weeks 1 through delivery. All right? Physiologically, you officially become pregnant when? Not when fertilization occurs, but when the baby implants itself into its the uterus of that mother. That's when you are considered pregnant. The length I already mentioned of gestation, it varies depending on what animal we're discussing about. But we also see a correlation between the gestation period and the amount of parental care that is witnessed. Meaning, the longer you're pregnant, the more care you end up taking care of your kids. So for elephants, they're pregnant for 24 months, 2 years. How long do they take care of their young? 20 years? For the rest of their lives. Elephants, once they give birth, that baby stays with the mother for the rest of its life. Yeah. And for us, we're pregnant for 10 months at most. And when is our socially acceptable time to leave? 18 years. So, yes. So it just depends. Some organisms have offspring, and they stay around for 2 years or so, and then they leave. So like if we talk about lions, especially if they're males. The males are forced off so that there's no competition with the father. So the time period of gestation usually correlates with the amount of parental care that young receives. As far as pregnancy in mammals, and so right now we're not talking about the whole animal kingdom, we're just talking about mammals. So they have to have body hair and mammary glands. There are 3 types of pregnancies. So the first one is monotremes, and that's referring to organisms like the platypus, which is the platypus, where this organism lays eggs and nests those eggs, and then once those eggs hatch, it cares for the young for an extended period of time. Once she lays her eggs, once they hatch, she cares for her young for an extended period of time, but in the routine of being a mammal, she has mammary glands, so she nurses her young. But she doesn't have advanced mammary glands like most mammals do. When she releases milk, she releases a waterfall of milk on her belly, and the babies just lick it off. So it's a unique manifestation of her characteristics, but it is what it is. So monotremes. Marsupials, like the kangaroo and opossum, they deliver a premature baby, usually without even knowing they delivered a baby. When kangaroo are technically born, they're about the size of the top digit of your pinky. No eyes open, no formal development of forearms and hind limbs. They have to make their way out of the vagina, up the mother's belly, and into her pouch, attached to a nipple, and then grow there the rest of the time. Not many are successful. Because mom doesn't even know, she's just having leaves with her friends, and she gives birth, then she runs off to the next party and hits a tree branch and the baby's gone. Like, their mother is not aware that this baby is fighting for its life, literally, to make it to that pouch. So she doesn't know. We also notice that these mothers usually give birth to multiples. Why? Yeah, their chance of survival is pretty slim. So usually 1 to 2 make it into that pouch, and there are multiple nipples to accommodate all the young that do make it. but not all of them are used, of course, because they don't make it. As far as the gestation period, the time that baby spends in the mother's uterus, it's usually, I believe, 3 to 4, maybe 5 weeks. So it's born that early. And then it spends over a year in her pouch once it makes it. But that's not considered gestation because by definition gestation means you're in the uterus. Eutherian mammals are what you and I are. We become pregnant, a temporary organ is developed, the placenta. The placenta is half mom, half baby. And it nourishes that offspring until it's ready for delivery. And then once it's delivered, the placenta is removed. So each child gets a new placenta and is taken care of in utero and not born until it's able to carry out the life functions on its own. Okay, so eutherian mammals. All right, you're officially pregnant, as I mentioned a moment ago, once implantation occurs. So fertilization is where sperm and egg meet, and you have the zygote, and we're going to talk about all those steps a little bit later. But you don't officially become pregnant until that ball of cells implants itself into the uterus, and after fertilization, that can be anywhere from 6 to 12 days. So it mentions that it could be 1 to 2 weeks after fertilization. In the event that implantation does occur, the uterus is happy because that's the whole purpose that it's been preparing for in that time frame, that month. So it will begin secreting substances to help nourish and welcome that baby and to make the endometrium a nice, habitable spot for this organism to develop for the next 40 weeks, if we're talking about a human. The placenta, a temporary organ, is half baby, half mom. The mother's half comes off of the endometrium, so the inside layer of the uterus. The baby's part is what we call the chorion, and I'll teach you that a little bit later too when we get to the triploblast and all those layers. There is never, so the placenta comes really close, the tissues come really close, baby and mom's tissues come super close, but they never touch, and the blood never mixes, but they're close enough that diffusion can occur. So mom has a whole lot of oxygen, and it goes from mom to baby. Baby has a whole bunch of carbon dioxide, it goes from baby to mom. Like it can diffuse. The tissues are very close, but they don't touch or mix. Okay? Don't touch or mix. Case in point right here. This right here, you can see that this is, let me tell you in case you don't know what a placenta is. This is the placenta, okay? And this mom is very pregnant because you can tell this baby's developed. So she's further along. This isn't like a new early pregnancy. So the placenta is there. In the event that the placenta is there, that also gives us a timing. The placenta isn't fully developed until 3 months after pregnancy. So this baby's at least out of its first trimester, okay? This organ right here, we've taken a cross-section, a clip of it, and we have it here. This is the mom. This is the baby part. Here is the umbilical cord. So you can see that they come close to one another, but like oxygen diffuses from the mom to the baby, and carbon dioxide diffuses from the baby to the mom, but their blood is kept separate. They don't mix because we don't talk about that in here. But mom's blood and baby's blood, they could be different blood types. And if you have a different blood type than your child, your body's going to reject it, and it's going to either kill you or the baby. So, the placenta. Last period, I had some really excellent questions, so I want to kind of expound upon those real quick. So, at this point, the baby is already head first. This right here is the cervix. This is the part of the uterus that has to dilate 10 centimeters so that the mother can give birth to this child. The 10 centimeters is roughly the size of the baby's head. We always want to deliver the baby's head first because that's the biggest part. And then after the head comes out, then the muscle immediately begins to kind of come back together, and that's okay because the rest of the baby's body is smaller. So the head is the biggest part. But their question was, so how does all of this work out and how is all of this removed, and what do you mean the placenta doesn't stay? This is a really big uterus, okay? The placenta is an organ that develops, and then extending from the placenta is the amniotic sac. Then, from the placenta, extends the umbilical cord, and then you have the baby. Okay? So, uterus, placenta, amniotic membrane, what's this called? Umbilical cord, and then baby. I'm going to move this camera just a little bit because you can see it. There we go. All right. So, the placenta, being a temporary organ, just develops so that it can nourish that offspring. When this baby is born, before it's born, the bag of waters has to rupture. So the amniotic membrane has to break. So this is the bag of water breaking. And now the baby will come out head first. And when the baby gets out, they will cut the umbilical cord. They'll take the baby. The baby will get cleaned up and is taken care of. It takes about 15 minutes or so. Then the doctor will come back, grab the umbilical cord, and pull out the placenta. The placenta will separate from the uterus, and they'll deliver the placenta. At that point, there's nothing left in there to take care of that baby. So the umbilical cord will be pulled. It'll pull the placenta. It'll come off of that uterine wall. Also, once she has the baby, she doesn't stop having contractions immediately. It can sometimes take 4 to 5 days for her to stop having contractions. So as she's having these contractions, it stimulates, because there's no baby there anymore, the uterus gets smaller. Because if you don't use it, you lose it. So the uterus is like, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. It gets smaller and smaller. And as it does that, it actually starts to tear apart the placenta. So this is just a temporary organ, and it's there to nourish that offspring. Another great question was asked during third period. They said, well, what happens if the placenta becomes detached? Well, if the baby is in there and the placenta is detached, it's literally a life-threatening situation because the mom can't breathe for the baby. And if the mom can't breathe for the baby's oxygen levels are low, that baby's on its way to expiration. So you have about 4 or 5 minutes, and then that's it. So a detached placenta is a big deal. Things that could cause the detachment of a placenta, like jostling, like you're on a roller coaster, or blunt force trauma, like something hits you in the back, you're in a car accident. Anytime you're pregnant and anything traumatic happens to you, even if you say you're fine, they still take you to the hospital because you might feel fine, but something may have happened to the placenta, the uterus, and that offspring may have been affected. Also, on this diagram right here, one more thing. Right here is the fallopian tube. Here would be the ovary. So that's where the egg had been released from. The baby implanted, and you can already see that the uterus has gotten much bigger within that abdominal cavity. Like it's already surpassed where the fallopian tubes were at one time. It was much lower than that. So that area will accommodate. When people say after delivery that, oh my gosh, their organs were everywhere, and I know we've addressed this before, your organs are not taken out of your body if you have a C-section or if you deliver vaginally. People tend to think that the umbilical cord looks like intestines, so they automatically they're like, oh my God, your intestines were out. No, it is just the umbilical cord. Your organs stay all together. That's not a thing. Okay? Any questions on any of that? All right. So, human pregnancy is divided into 3 trimesters, so that's roughly 9 months. So, the gestation period is 40 weeks, but 9 months is only 36 weeks. Okay? And 36 divided by 3 is 12, which gives us roughly 3 months. So we divide it into 3 trimesters. The reason why is babies are ready to be delivered if they're 36 weeks old. So a healthy baby can be delivered anywhere from 36 to 42 weeks, even though our textbook gestation period is 40 weeks. At 36 weeks, you can technically be delivered and be completely able to carry out your life processes on your own. During the first trimester, that organism is really developing. It is very small. We call it organogenesis, and we'll kind of get into that tomorrow. No, Monday, because we have an autopsy tomorrow. The organs are developing. The systems are kind of coming together. The second trimester, so this is where you're hitting the 3rd month. At the end of the 3rd month, going into the 4th month, this baby is just growing in size. Not gaining weight, but growing in size. So this is during the time that the mom actually looks pregnant. Because the baby at this point, although they're growing in size, by the end of 3 months, they're only like the size of a walnut. Like it's not a big baby yet. Then it grows in size, and that's when the mom starts to look pregnant. The 3rd trimester, the final trimester, all the organs are finishing their maturation process. The lungs are going to be last because the baby doesn't have to breathe inside its mom. So that's the last organ system to mature. And the baby gets fat. So we see babies who are born that are like 9, 10, 11 pounds. They're a little bit further past because they continue to gain weight. But the doctor could let you be pregnant for 42 weeks. So it's possible that you deliver a really large kid. So it's a thing. It's a thing. Now the due date for a child is calculated based on the mother's last menstrual period. And that is just an estimate. So a due date is just a date that you put in a calendar, like I'm expecting to have a baby around this time. The baby doesn't just pop out on that day. In fact, it's not uncommon for babies to come earlier than their due dates or even weeks after their due date. So don't get a fix on a date. The baby themselves will determine when it's time to be born, which is what we're about to get into. The actual process of birthing or parturition is initiated by the child. Some babies just want to hang out inside their mom because they don't have to do anything and their mom's doing everything for them. Some of you still have that problem, but you're not inside your mom, you're just really close to her and she does everything. It's not alright. That's why you needed me in your life to be like, suck it up and figure it out. Next. The baby, when it's ready to be delivered, will position itself head first, so upside down. And it'll start kind of pushing against the mother's cervix. Some babies don't ever get head first. And when you get to the doctor's office, the doctor's like, if it's not head first, we're not going to deliver it naturally. So, you can manipulate the position of your child. So you just kind of push it and move it and tell it, hey, scoot over this way. But the bigger the kid is, the harder it is to do that. So if you have a tinier kid, smaller kid, it's easy to be like, hey, flip them around. And you can do that. If it's a bigger kid, there's not enough room to move around. It's not anything for towards the end of your pregnancy. You can be walking around and all of a sudden you see a foot kind of pop out of your shirt, like they're just pushing up against the side, like they're stretching. And you just see this like whole foot. Of course it's your skin, it's not their foot like dangling outside of your body. But pushing up against you and you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. They push up on your ribs. When the baby's that big, it's trying to stretch at some point throughout the day. It's possible, and you hear a lot of moms talking about this too, and especially their first pregnancy because they're like weirded out. Like they'll just be standing there and all of a sudden you'll just see, like, they'll just move, or they'll do this whole like roll thing. Like they're just rolling over and your belly just rolls with it. And it's just like, oh. So when they're that big, it's easy to see their movements, but they're only that big for 5 or 6 weeks because the rest of the time they were pretty much developing. Now, if you have a much longer pregnancy, you're about the size of a house, and you can see and feel every single movement that kid is doing. But when they're ready, they'll let your body know. Today, though, you can probably find a doctor that you can say, I want to have my baby by this time because I have a vacation planned at this time. And a lot of doctors will let you do that. So much for a baby really telling you that's ready. when the baby continues to push, their head first, they continue to push, they begin to release a hormone called fetal oxytocin. And that fetal oxytocin travels to the mother's brain and says, oh, it's time for us to have this baby. This process could take weeks. So it is possible that a woman starts having contractions and she doesn't deliver her child for 3 weeks. So it's a thing. And because it's chemically gated, it's chemically communicated, it travels slowly. If it was electrically communicated, the brain would say, let's have the baby, and the baby would. Okay, so it's all chemicals, it's all hormones. So anyways, we talked about this in 1406. The oxytocin is released, and it tells the uterus, squeeze. And the uterus squeezes, and the baby pushes at the same time, but the baby doesn't come out. So it sends a message back to the brain that said, hey, I squeezed, but no baby came out. So the brain releases more oxytocin, and it continues to increase the amount of oxytocin. It is possible that you have a contraction, and then you don't have another contraction for 12 hours, because it takes that long. But once your hormone levels get high enough, the contractions will happen so quickly together that it literally forces the child out of the body. Okay? So it mentions that that whole thing is explained right here. So the baby starts the delivery process. So here it's showing you the feedback cycle with the hormones. But here you have a baby who's head first. This part right here, the cervix, is what needs to stretch 10 centimeters. And it's the size of that baby's head. So if you have a baby who has a really big head, 10 centimeters might be too small. So it may have to stretch further. You may be in labor a little bit longer. Then right here is the vagina. The vagina doesn't stretch during labor. It stretches during delivery. And I'm about to give you a life lesson. And you're going to listen to me because you have to. And you can't walk out at this point. This is a traumatic experience for the child, but also for the female's body. And the doctor will say, do not touch her for 6 weeks. Do not engage in any type of sexual intercourse until 6 weeks after this process has happened, because this tissue has to heal. If you do, it will not heal, it will scar. And it will not go back to its original shape. That is not good for the male or the female. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. So if they're like, hey, it's been like 3 weeks, can we please have sex? The answer is no. The answer is no. Because 6 weeks is enough to wait for your whole life to be okay afterwards. Also, another thing that happens is you engage in intercourse during that time, that tissue scars, so you've already ruined that, but the uterus got this big to accommodate your baby. It has to get back down to its normal size. That takes 18 months. Now, within 6 weeks, it gets much smaller, but it's still bigger. If you get pregnant and your uterus hasn't got back to its original size, it's this size, it remembers this size after the second pregnancy. It doesn't ever go back to normal. So you literally look pregnant the rest of your life after you have that second baby. It's what happens, because your uterus contracts and it stops here. You get pregnant and it starts growing from here. It doesn't go back down and then start all over. It starts from here and gets bigger. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay? But the feedback cycle continues to occur where the hormones continue to increase, and it will cause the cervix, along with the baby's head, to dilate those 10 centimeters. Like I mentioned, it's a traumatic experience, especially for the vaginal canal, but you will heal completely because you're not going to touch anybody. And doctors have been doing this for years, and they know it. And you are trusting me, and if you forget and you need me to remind you, just send me a text message when you're about to have your kid. I'll show up in the delivery room and make sure everybody understands what the expectations are. It'll be awkward. For y'all, not for me. I'll be like, trust me, you need to take care of yourselves. 3 stages of labor. The first one is the dilation stage. That, as I already mentioned, it may be like a 2-day period for some women, and it may be a 3-week period. So when you start dilating, if the doctor says, hey, you've dilated to a 1, everybody gets excited. They're like running to the hospital. It can take you 8 days to dilate 9 more centimeters. So then you're in the hospital for that long. But I will tell you this, a lot of doctors won't admit you to the hospital until you're around 4 or 5 centimeters dilated, because then it's maybe like a day and a half or so. Okay, and then they can also give you oxytocin, synthetic oxytocin, which is called pitocin, which will help you dilate faster. So this process, we'll say at the fastest, a few hours. At the longest, a couple weeks. These uterine contractions continue to get stronger and stronger as the levels of oxytocin, that hormone, increase, and the fetus is expelled. So when the baby leaves, that's when the baby's been delivered. And as I mentioned earlier, after the baby's delivered, about 15 minutes afterwards, they go back and deliver the placenta. The placenta cannot stay inside that mother's body. It will become infected. It's just not a thing. So they will remove that placenta. The placenta, as far as its consistency and its structure, the placenta itself looks like a steak. The amniotic sac doesn't. It looks like a bunch of membranes. But it's just a small steak organ that is removed during that placental delivery. Okay, so this is showing you stage 1 as the cervix is dilating. So remember, it was the size of the tip of a pin initially. Okay, and as the baby continues to push up against it, and look at how crowded he or she is right now. It doesn't show. So he or she is super crowded. And so they're pushing against it, and the uterus is contracting at the same time. This baby is upset. All right, pushing up against that uterus. It causes that cervix to dilate head first. The head is the biggest portion, and everything else will come out after it. And then once that's done, here's the umbilical cord. You can see that the uterus has already started shrinking because there's no baby in there, and that continues to contract. You pull the umbilical cord, and the placenta will detach. It'll follow it. This process, as I already mentioned, is very traumatic for both the baby and the mother, but the endometrium at this point has been pulled off along with that placenta. So this woman will have a heavy menstruation for about a week, but will continue to menstruate for up to 4 to 6 weeks. So that's another reason why you don't engage in intercourse during that time. Okay? That's like the natural way of telling you to stay away from each other. And then I also told you. All right, this is where you and I are going to stop for today. Any questions? Yes?
Does that rush of oxytocin kind of lead to like depression after birth? It's like you have that rush and then it just stops.
No, the depression, there's a lot to that. The depression after birth is linked to the immediate hormonal fluctuation. You go from having high levels of both fetal and maternal hormones to after delivery dropping. Another aspect of the depression, though, not even linked to the hormones, is the fact that you look at yourself and you imagine that you had this kid and you would go back to looking normal, and you don't, and it takes a while. And so that's what a lot of people struggle with. Another thing is that you knew you were having a kid, but you didn't know how to take care of a kid. So now all of a sudden you have this person that you have to take care of, and you're like, what? So there are many different facets of that depression. Most of it is they're unhappy physically with the way that their body looks after. Because you don't leave the hospital and then you look like you did before you got pregnant. You still look like you were in your 3rd or 4th month of pregnancy, at least uterine-wise. And so a lot of women are like, what? I thought if I had this kid, all the weight would fall off. That's what I thought with my first kid for sure. That was just stupid. And you don't eat 2 chicken fried steaks. A baby can't even eat a chicken fried steak, just so you know. That's what you get for being young and then